Lied Can Fly, podcast for contemporary art song. Hello and a warm welcome to Lied Can Fly. My name is Sabine Berg and I created this podcast to give contemporary art song a heart and an ear in the internet. And I'm very happy that so many composers from many countries take part, and it's growing and growing. And today I'm very thrilled because we've got a British composer who lives in Ireland, and that's Tom Lane. Hello, Tom.
Hi, how are you? Hi.
Good to see you, and I'm very, very happy to have you here. Tom, I will present you a little bit. You're
Great.
born in Bristol. You have a German mother, and as I suppose an English father, maybe.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct.
And you studied at the Balliol College in Oxford. You studied music and then composition at the Royal Academy of Music, and then composition and experimental music theater at the Berlin University of the Arts. And then you also absolved a PhD in site-specific composition at the University of Cork.
Yep.
And you've been writing for orchestra, you've been writing for opera, but also for contemporary dance and for theater plays and soundscapes, sound design. So you have a very broad field of experience, and you have been working at many theaters in Ireland. You were associate artist of the Gate Theatre. You've been collaborating with the Abbey Theatre. You've been nominated 7 times for the Irish Times Theatre Award, for example, for the best soundscape or the best opera. Your piece Nocturne was performed 2023 by the National Symphony Orchestra of Ireland. So just apologize for my stumbling in my English.
That's okay. No,
It's
that's great.
sometimes difficult to bring all the wonderful names into one little
Yeah, of
introduction.
course. Yeah, no, I would. Your English is much better than my German because I haven't practiced very much recently.
Well, thank you. And Tom, you've been also working recently with Theater Trier, with the choreographer Hannes Langolf
Yep.
for his piece Unruhe. And this year, in August, you have been working with the Neue Staatsoper im Künstlerhaus Wien for a choreography with Impulstanz. So, Tom, what I'm really, really thrilled about is that you like to work with choreographers and dancers and actors, and you also play the viola, and you're also a singer. So I would say you have a very broad horizon, and
I'd say so. Yeah. That's very kind of you to say. Yeah.
and also as your mother is German and you studied in Germany, and I came through to your name because I just stumbled into a wonderful woman in Wismar at the harbor, and she was just talking about some crowdfunding, and I said, oh, crowdfunding is so interesting, could be good for my podcast. And then we started talking, and after 2 minutes she said, oh, I know a composer, Tom Lane, and
Hmm.
she's been playing with you in an orchestra in Berlin. And I love it when
Yeah.
the world starts to be such a tiny place. And then I've been doing a little research, and I found your Rilke Lieder.
Yeah.
So how did that come? You wrote the Rilke Lieder, 3 songs after poems by Rainer Maria Rilke 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Is it
Hmm.
connected to your German history, or did it just come by
Hmm.
some incident?
Yeah, well, good question. Yeah, it was 2013 I wrote these, and I have always been interested in Lieder because when I was still at school, I was studying lots of things, but I was really interested in music, and I thought it might be something I wanted to pursue later. And I was composing, but I was also playing the piano and the violin, the viola, and also starting to do some singing studies. And I was very interested in Lieder, in Schubert Lieder and Schumann Lieder, and I've actually found my original scores, which I have here, sort of Bibles, the Lieder collections of Schubert and Schumann, and it was something that I would play on the piano. This is when I was a teenager, maybe 15, 16 years old. I'd play on the piano and sing a little bit as well, and then I'd sing a little bit with my singing teacher, and I'd study those things. And then when I went on to university, I did more singing lessons and also at music college when I was at the Royal Academy of Music in London, I did voice as a second study alongside composition. And I sang a lot in choirs, and I still do that now. And I sing in sort of professional choirs as well. But Lieder was a way of me to way for me to really get underneath the skin of the music of these great composers, especially of the 19th century. So the Schubert Lieder and the Schumann Lieder. And because I had a little bit of access to German through my mother, it was really nice for me to be able to use that language and to really get into the songs because in translation they're just not the same. And I was just always fascinated with the interaction of the poetry and the music and how that works. And then even from very early on, maybe when I was 16, 17, I started trying to compose my own lieder, which is a bit of a strange thing to be doing in the sort of 21st century, kind of emulating a 19th century form. But because I think they were so close to me because I sang them and played them a lot, I really wanted to try it out myself. So I used some Heine poetry as well, which was obviously very close to the great leader composers. And then I continued that through university, and then fast forward to 2013, and I really wanted to revisit this kind of leader composition, and I wanted something a bit more sort of complex and less structured and less metered than the Heine poetry. And Rilke was always a poet I had tried to read and understand, and he's a great poet and very, very, very kind of complex and revered. And I discovered this poem, the first one, An die Musik, so to music, and instantly I was of course reminded of the Schubert song, the very famous song An die Musik, which is completely different, but I thought maybe this Rilke poem is referencing that because it's such a well-known song and poem. And then I thought, what it's a nice kind of symmetry as well that you're writing music about music. And then I managed to find then I did a bit of research and I found other poems by Rilke about music. So there's one called just Musik, and there's one called Bestürzt mich Musik. So it's all kind of poetry texts related to music directly, which is very, I guess, self-referential as well. And it seemed to make sense to me because I was writing in this form, which in itself is sort of a slightly archaic form. So it was already, the songs were already referencing themselves, and then the text was referencing itself. And it seemed to make a kind of nice circle. And yeah, so then I just went ahead and started composing them. And it was great. Then I worked with a few different singers who interpreted them. And that's always a really, really great joy. And I worked with a couple of singers in Dublin. I played some of the piano for some of the performances. And then a singer in the USA got in touch because she was looking for contemporary songs to add to a recital, because I think sometimes it can be hard to find contemporary music to go alongside other kind of leader and songs
Exactly, and that's
from
also why,
longer ago. Yeah,
sorry,
exactly. Yeah.
why I started this podcast, also for
Mm,
singers who are interested
mm,
to find it, because it's not easy to
yeah.
find it, because most of the time it
Mm,
just stays somewhere in the Schublade, in the drawer of
yeah.
some
Yeah.
poets, and her name, we are going to listen to the music very soon, is Emerald Leslie, and she
That's
sang
right.
it in 2015 at the
Yeah.
University of Washington in Seattle. And she's also doing a lot of new music. And I always say thank
Mm,
you to all the singers who are really
mm,
interested in new contemporary music. And I found it so thrilling that you picked three poems of Rilke about music, and they are so different. And to prepare this podcast, I read a whole dissertation about Rilke and music.
right. Wow.
So
Yeah. Okay. I should read that too.
so you can find it in the internet. It's by Herbert Deinert, written in 1959, a
Right.
dissertation for Yale University. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but what
Mm,
Deinert is saying in his dissertation about Rilke and music is that he has a very complex relation to music, and the poems you've picked, you can really feel these differences also in every
mm,
poem. That there's a different notion, a different relation to music,
yeah.
and Rilke in the beginning, and you have to see it in a chronological way, the way Rilke all his life developed more and more into being more and more interested in music. In the beginning, he was an Augenmensch. He was struck by Rodin and Cézanne,
Mm,
and it was always about the Schauen, the seeing. And later on, he got an Ohrenmensch. He became an Ohrenmensch, and
mm.
listening and silence was so important for him that he was fighting with
Oh,
all
okay.
the neighbors who tried
Yeah.
to play the piano in the neighborhood because it was disturbing him. But in the
Right. Yeah.
beginning,
Yeah.
the only relation to music was when he was young that he had this dust cloth where he had to clean the piano, and
Hmm.
the piano was humming under his hands where he had to clean it in a metallic way. So he was really far away from being taught anything about music,
Yeah.
and in his poems you feel you can feel such a development. Many women just took him into concerts, and he was struck by Beethoven, and then later on he also saw the Magic Flute in Hamburg. So he has a whole, all his life was like a, you can see it like a timeline, like a development to come closer and closer to music. And I found it, but I find it also very interesting that he was in the beginning, he felt that music was just about seduction and berauschend, that he was there was no rational element in it. And when he was with Rodin in Paris, Rodin played him a Gregorianic choral, and he was totally struck by this Gregorianic choral. So he learned all his life about music, and I picked this first song that you wrote, An die
Mhm.
Musik, because
Yeah.
I felt there's the highest complexity of what music could be, and a
Mm,
poet saying so much about music that you cannot talk about music anyway. I'm trying to
mm,
talk about music in the podcast, but it's not possible really to talk about it. But Rilke was so, from being a completely analphabetist, or how you say it, and with music, to becoming a friend of a pupil by Busoni, and then he was even helping Busoni being published by the Insel Verlag, and he got a note by Busoni into the book. So he was getting more and more in contact, and deeper and deeper. And I feel that in this poem, you find the deepest research of what music could be, like where the speech ends and an audible landscape, or the most beautiful verse is when it says another side of the air. How did you feel about this, Tom? Was it a big field of experience of music coming, evolving inside you when you read all these
mm.
verses?
Yeah. I mean, do you mean the kind of process of turning it from a text into a song? Yeah, it's always an interesting experience. You start with songs like this, I would generally start with the text, and you try to read it and understand it, and partly you're trying to understand something just about the rhythm and the emphasis of the words, but then of course also about the meaning and the kind of images within the text. I tend to then really use the individual lines to shape melodies. I'd always start with the voice part and see what I can sort of bring out, and how can I set the lines to music in the clearest way and the way that expresses the poetry the best way in my opinion. And I maybe other composers do it differently, but that's the way I usually start. And then it's a kind of process of starting with a few small lines and trying some different harmonies with those lines, and then maybe expanding the song, and then maybe adding an introduction. So in this song, An die Musik, there is a kind of piano introduction, which is also a very common thing in a lot of 19th century Lieder. And I wanted it to really express the images that we hear at the beginning of the text, where it's talking about, the breath of statues and the silence of pictures and paintings, and sort of an inexpressible meaning. So for me, that represented a sort of expansive sound, and a sort of slightly mysterious, expansive sound. And I did my best to create something like that with the piano, because it's obviously just one instrument, but of course the piano has such a beautiful big range, and it's so resonant, and you have all these many, many strings, which when you play one note and you lift the pedal, then all lots of other strings resonate. So for me, that was that kind of resonating space really represented these images of emptiness, but things filling emptiness, but a kind of ringing and a resonance filling that emptiness and disappearing again. So you'll hear the introduction that has these sort of has a very low note and very high notes, and it sort of explores that big resonant space. I guess it's like the piano is a big resonant box, and it's creating a resonant world. Um, and that's what I'm trying to do with the introduction, and then the voice kind of comes in and almost fills out that resonance with a more tangible melody. And ideally, there is this lovely effect with the piano that when you sing or play other instruments into a sort of an open piano, especially a grand piano, with the when the pedal is down, the sustain pedal, that the strings can then be made to ring as well, sort of like a reverb or a extended resonance. So that was kind of the idea then that the voice was coming in and continuing the reverberation of the piano strings. And then it moves into a more active section, which is more kind of reminiscent of a traditional accompaniment with a voice part.
This is so interesting, Tom, because I really feel that the more I listen to your song,
Mm,
the more I admire it because it's
great.
it is really the way you come from stillness and space, and I in the beginning in the introduction I feel this also this it is some kind of vertical space for me. I can't explain
Mm,
why. That
yeah.
opens up in the beginning such a huge space, and then suddenly the voice goes into more movement that could be like operatic,
Mm,
like a and goes more and more into singing alive into the horizontal space.
yeah.
So, I don't know. And then you come back to the beginning with the
Mm,
vertical structure, with this introduction, with this big space, as you say. But I felt there was some
mm,
kind of vertical quality in it, and this is
yeah.
in German
I
we
think
say
that
so
was
gelungen. It's so gelungen.
sort of achieved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think I was. I'm trying to think back. It was 10 or 12 years ago now, but I think what I was trying to achieve was at the beginning of the poem that it is describing these sort of very huge, large concepts, and then in the second section of the kind of second paragraph of the poem, I've said it's more movement. It's talking maybe more about emotions and tangible emotions, sort of more tangible than abstract images. So it goes into this more expressive song-like quality to express that. But also, I mean, from a purely a sort of dramaturgical or compositional perspective, trying to give variety within one song, so that in theory this song could be sort of very short standalone piece. And I think this is also the first song I wrote of these ones, and I didn't think it would be a collection, and it could also just be a single song. So it's just a kind of habit of mine to try and have interest and not always just kind of languish in a static space. If you have one thing, then try and contrast it with a different thing, and then a nice neat sort of ABA structure,
Yeah, exactly.
which is I guess just it's just my kind of habits as a composer and trying to kind of create something satisfying and create a journey within the musical experience,
Yeah.
which is maybe also my from my experience of theatre as well, that there is this kind of narrative and dramaturgy, dramaturgical structure within music. I tend to like to have satisfying and complete structures,
Yeah. And you also
which is
have it
yeah.
in Bestürzt mich Musik in the third song.
Mm,
There's very
yeah,
eruptive rhythms, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
and I really like that you positioned Andi Musik in the beginning of the song cycle and
mm,
Bestürzt mich Musik in the end. So,
mm,
and the second song is one of his very late poems. And
mm,
so it's not chronological, but the
mm,
dramaturgy is working
mm.
very
That's
well.
good. Yeah,
Shall we have a listen to it?
sure. Yeah.
This was Musik by Tom Lane after a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke. The soprano was Emerald Leslie and on the piano Andrew Romanek. The live recording was 2015 in the University of Washington in Seattle. Now I'm going to read the lyrics. Musik by Rainer Maria Rilke. Musik, Atem der Statuen, vielleicht Stille der Bilder, du Sprache, wo Sprachen enden, du Zeit, die senkrecht steht auf der Richtung vergehender Herzen. Gefühle zu wem? O du der Gefühle Wandlung, in was? In hörbare Landschaft. Du fremde Musik, du uns entwachsener Herzraum, innigstes Unser, das uns übersteigend hinausdrängt. Heiliger Abschied, da uns das Innere umsteht als geübteste Ferne, als andere Seite der Luft, rein, riesig, nicht mehr bewohnbar. So this week we celebrate Rilke's 150th birthday. Thank you and happy birthday, Rainer Maria Rilke. Yes, Tom, it's so wonderful to discover contemporary art song and to see what composers are doing with poems. And I mean, Rilke, many composers took him, and many composers, even when he was alive, he said, "Oh no, no! It seems that everybody is allowed to set my poems into music." So he liked Lieder. As I found out that he always accepted the art form of Lied, but when there was a recitation of his cornet, he was really not very happy with it because it was spoken word, a monodrome. It was performed as a monodrome with spoken word and music, no musical line, no melody. And so he wasn't always happy with the way his poetry was set into music. But even in his lifetime, there were many composers taking his poems already. And I would say there could be a book about all the composers, the contemporary composers who've been taking Rilke poems, and you could make a whole book about it and then see the different Lieder that have been written after his poetry.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because in the beginning he was even denying music. Do you feel when you've been composing, did you feel this, I would say, a bipolar? You say bipolar? Somebody who is a bit manic depressive, and one time he's totally happy and the next day it could be completely the different. So did you have this split feeling when you was composing the music?
About Rilke,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know. Is there a theory that he was maybe
There
bipolar?
is some kind of a theory about, but
Yeah, I
he
didn't know
was even
that.
recommended to meet Freud, but in the end, as I read, they never met. But
Yeah, I don't
when
know
I
if
read his poetry, I
yeah,
feel there's
right.
some struggle inside him, and it could change from here to there very quickly. So I had this idea maybe he was a bit bipolar. So, but
Right, okay.
did you have this feeling of two hearts struggling inside him?
I mean, I didn't myself. I mean, I guess I maybe just a different relationship to the text and to text in general, maybe to you as well. And because I come from such a musical background rather than a literature or text background. So I maybe approach the text in a different way, and I'm maybe seeing different things in it. And maybe I'm quite utilitarian when I'm kind of going through it and looking for the kind of rhythms and emphases of the text. And maybe I'm not seeing as many layers to the content of the piece. But that's really interesting to hear that. And I'm always fascinated to hear how different people experience different art forms and different things. And even in music that I've written, some people will hear things that I never thought about that were inside. And I guess that's the really exciting thing, isn't it? That people have those different experiences.
Yeah. And how is it that, do you feel that as you've been writing a lot for dance companies and actors, do you feel that it helped your way of composition, that you
Mm.
were very connected to the human performers, like I always feel it's always good because it makes very strong and very reduced because
Mm,
you have to make choices, especially when somebody's dancing for it. Do you feel
mm,
that it helped you to express especially lead? And is there a
mm,
difference when you do some sound design? So I
mm,
also found that you've been composing just a wonderful piece. I have to read it. It's called Beats, Bells and Bridges. I found it in you composed it
yeah,
for the Midsummer Festival in Cork with bells and in nature. And there's also
mm,
a piece called Biosphere 2020 with Solothurn Beach and Sea that has been
mm,
performed at the beach of Dublin. So your range
yeah,
is you also make experience with sounds of nature and instruments. So
yeah,
how is it when you compose? Do you feel it's good to integrate both? Does it help you
yeah.
to work
I
directly with
mean,
actors or singers?
yeah, for me personally, I like to have work on a variety of different types of projects. I think other people might want to focus more on individual things. It's maybe just the kind of personality I am that I like to maybe focus on one thing, but not for too long, and then I can move on to something else, and then we come back to that other thing. It's maybe just a personal quirk of mine. But in terms of theatre and drama, I've always been very interested in opera, partly because of singing different arias and things, but also I just love watching it and experiencing it. And I always wanted to compose it, and I've been lucky enough to write a few short opera pieces. And I was always interested in how to make opera more dramatic and more theatrical, which is, I think that's been a preoccupation of composers since opera was invented. How can we integrate music and theater more closely? Just like the Greeks did, and in the Renaissance, how that started, and how just like Wagner and Mozart and all these great composers. And my approach, I guess, was to how learn more about theatre and drama and text based forms, and to understand those dramaturgical structures and how these incredible actors can express things so effortlessly, which they can sometimes it's easier to express things without music, and sometimes but there's other times when you need the music, and try and understand this kind of interface between text and music, which are so different and so opposite in many ways, but then when you can bring them together and create something really interesting as well. So I've always, yeah, I kind of been interested in all the different forms that can take. And dance is one of those things. And dance is on the other side of that argument very interesting because it hasn't often has no text. And you can also add text to it as well, but often it's completely textless and it's narrativeless. And you can invent narratives or you can just not be concerned with those narratives. Dance sometimes for me it represents sort of like a visual music because you're seeing those people move through the space, and you don't need to be concerned with exact meanings and pinpointing things into words, which is what I love about music as well. And it's a different part of your brain. It's a bit of different experience. But on the other hand, it's very, very interesting as well when you combine other dramatic elements with that, and things like physical theatre, which is like the piece you mentioned with Hannes Langolf. In that piece in Theater Trier, it had a combination of text, a combination of theatrical scenes and movement and music and sound design, a real kind of swirling mix of everything. And that's fascinating too. And it's often those moments when someone's dancing without music and the music begins, or someone is dancing and some text begins, or some text is joined by something, and those kind of little interfaces where different forms of expression meet and fuse and combine. So I guess I'm just fascinated by all the different possibilities of using music and using sound and listening to create new and interesting things. And I find them all very interesting. And even if it's just music for a very short video piece, or it's some very, very simple sound design of weather sounds or rain. How can that influence a scene? Or yeah, how
That's
can it
what I
how
wanted
if
to
you yeah.
ask you. Like,
Mm,
is it that when you do the sound design or like pieces
mm,
like the Biosphere 2020 out on the beach of Dublin
mm,
with a cornet solo
mm,
and the sea and the sound of the sea? Is it that you feel that you find your own colors? You find new
yeah.
aspects of colors, and I always
Mm,
feel like when you feel music is like painting or like when it becomes visual, and then when you bring your colors to Lieder, it is different because you work differently with the words, because you've got a big spectrum of colors already, and you're not you can be very close to the words, but you're not, how you say, abhängig. You're not too directly linked to the words, so you can open. Sometimes compositions can open up the poems and words as well.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting area as well. And I mean I've been lucky enough to work with contemporary living poets as well. Like there's a Irish poet I've worked with here called Jessica Traynor, and we tend to work in a similar way that she would create the poetry first, and then I send it to music, but then I can also go back to her and ask her questions about it and play her versions of it, and she can come back with feedback. And then I can, yeah, try and bring a new understanding to that poetry.
Yeah.
And it can be heard in a different way and experienced in a different way.
There was
And
a
it's all
project
fascinating.
called The Wanderer with
That's
Jessica
right. Yeah.
Traynor in
Yeah.
2022 at Cork Opera
Yeah.
House with
Yeah.
Irish Modern Dance Theatre. And it was
Yeah.
a bit close to and inspired by Schubert's Winterreise. And
Yeah.
it was about movement and migration. And
Yeah, I mean that's an example that was really bringing together so many different things because it was commissioned by a choreographer called John Scott, and he himself is also a singer an operatic tenor, but also creates very avant-garde and I don't know radical dance pieces as well. So it was a natural step then to create some sort of operatic sung music to go with this with this kind of choreography. And the idea was about migration and movement and wandering, and that for me then instantly reminded me of Winterreise and the kind of romantic sense of wandering and walking. And Winterreise was a kind of great expression of that. And so what I did for that is I just kind of wove very, very subtle and almost hidden references to different songs in Winterreise which if you weren't looking for them, you wouldn't hear them. One idea originally was to intersperse it with some of the original songs, but in the end, it was enough just to have the new music. But that was great because I really got to bring in all those different things that the kind of experience as a younger person of the German romantic leader, and then the more contemporary poetry and contemporary music, and then also with the choreography and the dance. And that was a great experience, which we kind of created during the COVID pandemic as well. And it was then just at the very end of that time that we performed it. And it was a great experience to bring it all together. And hopefully we'll have the chance to do it again sometime.
oh, Tom, it was so nice to have you here, and I'm so happy that I could have discovered your three Rilke songs, and
Great.
I hope that many singers will discover them, maybe through the podcast. And
That would be great.
it's a wonderful song cycle. It makes just sense. I would just say it just makes sense. It just I would say it has a validity, or how you say that it feels right, and there's so many beautiful aspects also in the piano.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for being my guest today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
This was Lead Can Fly with Tom Lane. Thank you for listening and hope you join us next time. If you want to support the podcast, you can become a Steady member on the Steady website. Just put in Lied kann fly or Lieder können fliegen, and for a little bit of money in the month, you get an early access to all the episodes, some extra information, and I will be just happy to have you there.